Welcome along to the 10th episode of the Guna Fanzine Arsenal Women podcast. Well, the Lionesses are on their way to Switzerland. We're looking forward to another tournament full of Arsenal involvement. We'll see as many as four Arsenal players hopefully going over to Switzerland with England, and three of them have been in action for the last couple of games. The Lionesses beating Ireland 2-1, and then a nil-nil draw with Sweden was enough to send them through to Switzerland. Daisy, not a lot to report on for last night's game. A draw was what they needed, and they were able to hold on for the nil-nil with those Arsenal players starting again. We'll start though at Carrow Road. You were there, 2-1 win over Ireland. How was the atmosphere, and how good was that first goal as well, the all Arsenal goal?
Yeah, the atmosphere was incredible. One of the best actually that I've seen at a Lionesses game recently. I don't know if I would say I was expecting it, but yeah, it was amazing. The weather not so good. It was a very wet and rainy, but to be fair, everybody came out, everybody
Hmm.
sat in the rain, and it was definitely worth it. They put in a fantastic performance. I know everybody talked about maybe we could have had more goals and things like that, but I thought we played extremely well. We really, based on if we get onto last night's result with Ireland as well, clearly they've got something about them, and we've really sort of,
Yeah.
we did quite well to like based on that. But yeah, the goal it was in itself was incredible, and I think it sums up that relationship that these Arsenal players have obviously built. Especially you could see it in both games. Mead and Russo really working together quite well. And I think that's just such a Russo goal, like making the run, taking it around the keeper. We've seen that so much. We saw it in the last game of the season for Arsenal, didn't we, as well? So, yeah, so many good performances. I thought Leah Williamson was fantastic in both games. We won't talk too much about that penalty she could have given away, but apart from that, I think there was some fantastic performances all round from all the Lionesses. But yeah, definitely those Arsenal girls as well.
Yeah, I tweeted when the first goal went in and going, that's the sort of goal Jonas will just be delighted to see. And a couple of people came back and went, well, it's him. He's got to put these players in the right positions. Is he using them the right way? And I feel like the last couple of seasons we have seen that's the sort of run Mead often hasn't really made as much. He has stayed a lot out on the right, but I think obviously with Emily Fox and her starting to build their relationship, maybe we'll see her drift in a little bit more with Fox maybe pushing out wide. Those two worked quite well together. But it's another reminder of how versatile Mead can be.
Yeah, definitely. I think I mentioned at the sort of the end of last season that he started to utilize her more in the box, more potentially, as that typical number nine that maybe she used to be associated with. I did also notice there was sort of a lack of going out wide and taking players on 1v1 yesterday, especially in that Lionesses game. Not just Mead, but also Hemp on the other side as well. So I think that maybe is part of the tactics that Serena Wiegman is trying to employ. We did see quite a lot of sort of passing it around the middle and sort of really good build-up play, and then maybe not so much of the end product at times. But it is kind of probably a similar style of play to what we'll be expecting to see from Arsenal as well. So I guess that's always a positive going into, pre-season soon, that the Lionesses girls, especially the girls who are at Arsenal, will get that sort of similar play style and get back into the rhythm. But yeah, I really like Mead playing in that central position as much as I think that she can put in a cross. I think if we're using the full back similar to how the Lionesses were using them, then it will definitely benefit Mead in that way.
Mm. Obviously, Rachel Daly, announcing her retirement, she was a player who obviously around the World Cup, a lot of people were saying, could she be starting more and could she be really competing with Russo for that number nine shirt? It is all Russo's now, isn't it? She is that main striker for England. And that's, Serena Wiegman must have watched her really closely over the last season, and she can only be happy with how she develops with Arsenal because you can see she's taken that again into the England colours because previously before it was all about her coming on as a sub. Often in the 2022 tournament, she'd come on with Ella Toon so they could sort of rekindle that United partnership. But I feel Russo's really made that number nine position her own now.
Yeah, and I think it maybe slightly helps that she's been given that, belief and backing from Serena, and similar to Arsenal, she's played most of those games there as well. I think there's always sort of I would say mixed reviews from people in terms of they see maybe that she's not that typical, a number nine goal scorer striker, and sometimes people don't really like that. But in a system like the Lionesses, what Lionesses are building now, and obviously at Arsenal as well, her like build up play, dropping deep, having more of that involved sort of role within the holding up the ball and moving it on. I think we talked about that so much last season, and clearly, Serena Wiegman is open to using that with to benefit the Lionesses as well. We saw her getting involved. It was a lot more difficult, I noticed, for her yesterday, trying to hold up that ball and move it on, and maybe getting in behind. And if she got more luck against Ireland, I thought, but that probably is more a testament of Sweden and how they defended quite well, and they've got quite a strong, solid centre back partnership. So I think there's a lot of different like attributes that we can use from Russo that can really help the team, and I clearly think that Serena Wiegmann's backing her all the way, and maybe potentially using other players to come on as like impact subs rather than Russo.
Often watching Sweden, we've got loads of Arsenal players to talk about. Arsenal, they have had, Lena Hurtig, Amanda Ilestedt, especially at the last World Cup, and Stina Blackstenius as well. And I think her presence was certainly missed last night. It was strange to see no Arsenal players in that Sweden side, especially, you think Jonas Eidevall, the Swedish connections as well, but none last night or in the previous game.
Yeah, they really miss. I believe that too. They really missed Blackstenius yesterday. I think it's a similar role to obviously what we've seen from Russo and also what we saw Sweden do against us at Wembley. Stina was involved in all of the build-up play. She
Yeah.
was dropping deep. She was, really sort of moving the ball around, and Sweden were really putting England under a lot of pressure in that initial game, and it just wasn't the same yesterday. They couldn't really, get in that rhythm, and usually we don't expect that kind of performance from Sweden. I mean, they got into it a little bit in that second half. I think that was definitely because of the subs that they made. But I think in terms of the attributes that Stina Blackstenius brings, she's going to try and get in the right place at the right time. She is quite clinical. She does score those important goals, and she's also involved in a lot of the build-up play as well. So I think it was a huge miss. And yeah, it is strange not to see any Arsenal players in there. I think when we're rooting for the Lionesses, or even whoever we're playing against, at least the bright side is if an Arsenal player scores against us, it's a positive sign. But we didn't have that yesterday, and luckily nobody scored, so we managed to stay okay there.
Great to see that win for Ireland over France. Of course, Katie McCabe was in there. I think there were four former Arsenal players as well in that side, including Anna Patten, who scored her first goal for Ireland after changing her national allegiance. McCabe coming back in as captain. Maybe Ireland didn't quite miss her as much as maybe we predicted it for Friday night's game, because obviously they did put up a stronger display than maybe we've seen before from them. They pulled that goal back late on, and you could see just how much that meant to them. They still got it all to do to qualify. We've also seen Spain, Denmark, and the Netherlands go through. Switzerland as hosts as well. I always forget that the hosts qualify automatically, and obviously Leah Valti's still recovering from her own injury. Spain, though, strong again, and Cadena and Caldente were in action.
Yeah, and there was a shock result in there for Spain as well. I don't know if we can obviously touch on that a little bit, but I think there was some very not shock results, but a little bit strange. Obviously, not many people would be expecting Ireland to get a result against France last night, and then obviously England didn't quite get those 3 points to go ahead. But obviously, it's just about qualifying, and I think there's gonna be some fantastic players and teams at this Euros. And what I noticed as well, I think it's going to be extremely competitive. I read the list of teams that have got through already, and I think there's maybe some really strong teams in there, and also some surprise teams who might shock at the Euros. I think the most important thing is that we get as many, Arsenal players there, and we can really root for them all. And yeah, I think also it was weird yesterday when, hate to bring this up again, but when Viv scored, and we were all, super happy. But that was the first time it really hit me that when we were watching international football, that she's not sort of an Arsenal player, but you still wish her well, and things like that. So yeah, there's been not so much action, has there, from specific Arsenal players as much as maybe we would usually have, potentially due to injuries and things like that. But yeah, I mean, going on to Ireland that you asked originally, I think Katie McCabe is always going to be sort of a huge name for them, isn't she? But they've got some other fantastic players in that side as well that really stepped up yesterday, and I thought there was some strong performances in the game at Carrow Road as well. I think maybe that their issue is slightly defensively at times.
Hmm. Yeah, the Netherlands, an interesting one. There's so many ex-Arsenal players in that team
Yeah.
now. It's amazing, and obviously Palova will maybe have a sight set on this tournament. I don't know what her sort of timeline will be like for the ACL, but I think realistically she will be aiming to return for next year's Euros in Switzerland. Denmark going through. Katrina Kuhl maybe still a little bit unsure of what her role will be for Arsenal next season, but she is really impressed with Denmark. She's still a young player, and she always seems to remind us how good she is on that international stage.
Yeah, I think we spoke about that as well, didn't we? The potential for, players to impress internationally and then potentially get a role in the Arsenal squad next season. Obviously, that's the one we've got to decide on, especially with the injury to Palova. We've talked about this before. Who's going to come in and fill that role? And is it going to be a case of somebody not going out on loan or bringing somebody in? But I think that Cole is making a case for herself. I think she's going to want to play first team football this upcoming season. There's no doubt about that. But I could really see the potential for her to grow as a player in that side, especially with that role opening up. But again, that's obviously going to be up to Jonas Eidevall and whether he brings her in or Kyra Cooney-Cross or things like that. So, there's or even Frida Martin. There's so many discussions about that have got to happen. But I just think it's so important right now. She's an Arsenal player, and we're gonna back her, and hopefully, she'll have a role to play next season. And yeah, we'll just sort of we always just wish them well, don't we, when they're playing in these fixtures?
Yeah, it's just the selection headaches again, isn't it? And
Yeah.
we'll move on to the under 19 Lionesses because some more selection headaches are going to be provided, and I guess loan headaches as well. Michelle Agyemang, who just seems to be far too good for that level at this point, hitting a hat trick, including a fine free kick against Lithuania, the tournament hosts, a 10-0 win for the under 19 England players. Marielle Vivlia, who of course both featured as well in that Australia friendly at the end of the season, and the academy players sort of I've spoken to in the close season have just said how much of a privilege it was to be able to train and play with some of these players. I mean, it's going to be loan deals, you feel, for the likes of Leah and Agyemang potentially, and there's always the option, I guess, of recalling them and getting them back in and around the squad. Obviously, with this pre-season tour to America, Arsenal, if they're able to, there's no harm in them bringing a few academy players over to sort of bolster their squad, and maybe that'll provide an opportunity. But Agyemang, do you think she could be good enough for a WSL loan this season, potentially making another step up?
Yeah, definitely. And I think Arsenal have to do everything they can to keep her, whether that's sending her out on loan and bringing her back, after that loan. But I think the question with Agyemang is really, is she going to get that first team football? I know we keep going on about this sort of decision that Jonas has got to make. I think that she's got the potential to play WSL football. I've seen a lot from her that, I like that free kick, she's got the talent and the ability, and she is sort of the older of that group as well. So I do really think that there's a WSL loan in there. I also wonder, depending on the decisions that we make with the squad, with forwards, if there is a role for her at Arsenal, maybe it's a little bit too soon. Maybe I'm just being optimistic, sort of taking on that under 19s sort of Euros and the way she's performed there. But I think the decision has to be made based on, is she going to get playtime at Arsenal? And if not, she's got to go out on loan, really. But I think that the main priority should be making sure that she comes back to Arsenal eventually, because I think she's a fantastic player.
I think almost physically she has sort of outgrown this level of football, hasn't she?
Yeah.
Particularly, you look at her height, her sort of stature, and she can really bully and dominate defenders. Even when we saw her coming up against Arsenal for Watford in the FA Cup game, she was not afraid to take people on because she was, they were playing a real low block against Arsenal. She was leading the line almost on her own, and she was bullying players. You look at the goal she scored. So it's a really interesting one. It's a player who Jonas Eidevall has been asked for a long time, but the positive thing, I guess, is that she is only 18. If she was 21, she'd be really pushing on some of her first team football. I guess Arsenal have the option to just hold her for a little bit longer. And then I think they've still probably got this Katie Reid versus Taya Goldie conundrum in terms of keeping one of them in the squad and then moving one out on loan. We've touched on that before, but Arsenal are going to need this defensive cover for whilst Amanda Ilestedt continues with her pregnancy.
Yeah, I think that's another, decision that's got to be made. I think maybe the presumption is that Teo has returned to training, but we obviously haven't seen too much of that just yet. I think again, Katie Reid's got an opportunity, hasn't she, at this Euros to sort of, get in that team, perform well, and sort of show Jonas Eidevall really, that level. I mean, we've seen it. We saw her in those Australia friendlies. We knew how admired. You talked about how admired she was at Watford as well. So there's absolutely a player in there, and if it means going on loan to a higher level team than she has been doing, I think that would really help her development. But I think it's not a decision that I would want to have to make. So I'm really gonna feel sorry for Jonas Eidevall there as well, because there are so many players who need a decision made this summer about their future, especially with the younger players as well. And obviously some of them like Taya just coming back from an injury and taking it easy as well. So I think that will play into it. And obviously we'll see how performances at the under-19s affect those decisions as well.
Yeah, particularly tough for Taya, isn't it? Because you would think that she would be the obvious choice, a little bit older than Reed, but Reed has showed so much potential now, and obviously another loan would be beneficial. But many, if Goldie wasn't there, she would be a shoe-in to go and play. But obviously, with Taya just being a little bit older and having bided her time for so long, you would feel for her. But it's almost like the time she spent on the sidelines in that time, a younger Taya Goldie who's been almost picked to go on and be even better potentially has been catching up. So it just shows how difficult those ACL injuries are, but we'll wait and see, and hopefully these preseason games will provide a nice little opportunity, and I guess we'll get a real idea of what the squad's looking like, because obviously by the time it's early September, Arsenal will have to submit their squad for the Champions League qualifiers, and we'll start to see who's going to be included in that tournament. Speaking of which, the details have been confirmed for those games, and Boreham Wood Worthing in the National League South has been kicked out of the way by the looks of things. Unless it's gonna, I mean, it could kick off right in the middle because it's down for 3 o'clock. The first game's going to be 12. The last one's going to be 7:30. But I think that's definitely going to be moved as we predicted last week. Atletico Madrid v Rosenborg and Arsenal Rangers Wednesday, September the 7th. Both of those games far enough apart. One's at 12, one's at 7:30, where I don't think fans will be able to mingle and watch both. They're going to be kept as sort of two separate fixtures. I'll get there really early as a journalist and try and watch both games. But it looks like that Boreham Wood game will be moved and the Champions League takes priority.
Yeah, I think that's a really good sign, isn't it? We talked about that a little bit in last week's episode about that decision to obviously release the fixtures, the Boreham Wood fixtures, and potentially Arsenal were so keen to host the Champions League qualifying. I'm really, excited for it to be. I know I don't want to repeat what I said last week, but I'm so excited for it to be held at Boreham Wood. I think we talked about the Emirates, sort of getting more games at the Emirates, maybe missing Boreham Wood a little bit, but I think with the home fans as well, like you can imagine it's going to be an incredible atmosphere. One of the first games back. A lot of people won't be going out for those US friendlies as well. So I think it's going to be an incredible tournament, and it's going to be a great welcome back for Arsenal. And we'll see if we've obviously improved on last year's Champions League qualifiers and how the season's going to go, and obviously integrating new players into the squad and obviously young players as well. So I'm super excited for it, and I think it's going to be a really good game.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the final and the third place playoff a few days later, Saturday, September the 7th. I've been telling everyone this week, I reckon our summer weather is just being pushed back towards early September. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and hope we have some lovely Meadow Park afternoons and evenings. And it's a 7:30 kickoff on a Wednesday. It's sort of at the back end of summer. There's going to be a bit of drinking going on. I think the Arsenal fans are going to quite enjoy that if they're still sort of on their summer holidays, and you can sit in the various Boreham Wood pubs. I know a couple have closed down recently, but it's a nice match day experience. It's not quite the Emirates, but they're the fans have really made Meadow Park their home, as we've said so often, and these games will be just a nice way to start the season. But looking at those two friendlies, Chelsea and Washington Spirit, you won't get any better preparation for these fixtures, will you, at the start of September? Compare that to last year, absolutely huge for Arsenal. It's going to be such a difference.
Yeah, two very strong teams, and obviously we know what Chelsea are like. You can't take too much from a result in pre-season, but also you can from playing at that level and playing with bringing new players in. And Chelsea will be doing the same thing if we obviously relate to Sonia coming in and obviously they're new players. So they'll both be testing things out, I can imagine. But I'm super excited to see but like how we perform against those top teams, also against an NWSL side, because we don't get much chance to do that, do we? So, that's a very different sort of play style, a different level to maybe what we're used to, and maybe not something that we're prepared for. So it gives us a chance to really, start the season on a positive, and obviously it's a chance for rotation as well. So we can't take too much from the result. But I'm super excited, and I'm sure there's a lot of, gooners out there in the US who are excited to see Arsenal as well.
Well, speaking of Chelsea, they have added yet another player. They've had a busy transfer window, of course, a change of management and a few players coming in. The latest, the big signing of Lucy Bronze, 32-year-old fullback from Barcelona, who've had a little bit of a change of the guard themselves in Catalonia this summer. But Bronze, we were saying off air a few years ago just how worried we might be maybe as Arsenal fans to see Chelsea go for a player like this. They do have a lot of options in defence, but it's still a quality signing.
Yeah, we know what Lucy Bronze is like. We saw a little bit of it yesterday. Maybe, not a signing that I would have expected sort of before the rumours came out, but you can't downplay what a career she's had, what a player she's been. She's cemented her place in that Barcelona side for a long time, and a little bit surprised that she didn't stay there as well, because I thought she was, doing quite well there, and I thought she'd really connected with the club in that way. But it was interesting that Chelsea of all teams went in for her, but potentially they've got plans that we're unaware about. But they're building a very strong squad. They've already brought in a few different transfers and things like that. We've got other sides that maybe are really pushing to bring in new players. So I think, next season could be a really interesting and a very tight title race if we all get this right.
Do you make them favourites for another WSL title? Because I mean, we obviously want to put Arsenal up there, and they absolutely are. But City are strengthening again. I think Manchester United will, well, their first priority will of course be finishing above Liverpool after the season they had. But they have been able to, and they have lost a couple of players. They have recruited well, Dominika Janssen coming in, and Elizabeth Turland as well this morning. If you were to give me your early title predictions, City, Chelsea, Arsenal, where would you put them?
This is a really tough one, even especially since we haven't seen pre-season as well, and we haven't seen how the squad's sort of and the team's gonna gonna be built. I think if Sonia Bompasta gets it right straight away and she hits the ground running, that will be huge for Chelsea. But obviously, when you bring in a new manager and a new system, the players have got to learn that, and they've got to learn that quickly, and it can't always go right, can it? I mean, I straight away believed that with the recruitment that City had made, and if they continue to do that and they continue to grow, I think they push for favourites and they will come back and just hit the ground running. I think their attacking, strength and their defensive stability is enough. And I would put City as favourites. I would absolutely love to back Arsenal, but I think it really depends on how we it's like, keep saying this, but how the teams start is so huge. We know that was the case for Arsenal losing that first fixture last year, and that really sort of we really lost those key moments. But I think what will be interesting next season will be the big games. How do they, shape up? Arsenal did quite well with them. We won the head-to-head between the three teams last season, so I do think that's a big one for Chelsea and Man City, and obviously their games were incredible as well. But I do think Man United have lost the spine of their team. They've lost their captain, they've lost their goalkeeper. These signings are fantastic. There's no downplaying that, but I do think that they will maybe struggle a little bit to settle with those absent players. And we can't write off other teams, Liverpool, Spurs. Who knows what they'll do? There could be a surprise in there, but for me, Manchester City have got a lot of firepower and great recruitment, and I think that could just tip them slightly over the other two. But there's always a surprise, isn't there, in there? So who knows what that's going to be?
And you're right in making the point about, obviously the WSL competitiveness has increased so much. We've seen so many different teams now taking points of Arsenal. But obviously a lot of it is going to come down to these big title deciding games. And United were far from their best in a lot of these games, even as close to the final day of the season when they were just completely brushed aside by Chelsea. Arsenal have improved on that a little bit. But obviously, we saw us dropping points to these teams lower down the league, the Spurs, the West Hams. One thing for me was interesting with City is obviously every year they seem to have good seasons without making the Champions League group stage. And I wonder how maybe if they've moved that up their priority list a bit, because we never talk about City as a side who have to balance their squad with Champions League and WSL football. And obviously Arsenal are hoping they're going to have that challenge as well if they can get back into the Champions League, whereas Chelsea are always in there, obviously as WSL winners, and they're always competing in the Champions League. Um, for Arsenal, I mean, if I'm going to make my predictions, I do fancy City to go one further. But like you say, I think that Chelsea squad, if they do all click, and obviously they'll be without Sam Kerr for the start of the season, Frank Kirby moving on, and they haven't lost a couple of players as of City. But I do think City's recruitment, that I think that attack, and there probably are a couple of defensive weaknesses there, but I think they could just score ridiculous amounts of goals with that front four, or the other players in and around it as well, the Mary Fowlers who are even sitting on the bench. And I think if they get that right, then they'll be they'll be flying. But I'm going to sit here now and say it's going to be another final day finish because of course with a WSL that's only got 12 teams in it, it is just so tight every year. And we can see when the broadcasters put their money on the table every year and say this is how much we're going to give, we want to show these games, we want to show these. When you look at a title race that is so close year on year out, and you compare that to some of the European leagues that are just won by one dominant team, it is so exciting. It's almost a shame that we have to support one of these clubs that's in the title race because it's so much fun every year.
I just hope that we're a little bit more involved than we
Mm.
have been. And I think maybe it would be like you're saying about the decision to, decide like between the Champions League and the WSL and sort of priorities in terms of what if it was a choice of for maybe for Arsenal fans, if it was a choice of doing better in the Champions League but dropping off in the WSL, maybe they would make that decision and we would be happy to. But I think, for a lot of people, Arsenal's, title race, they need to be in it, basically, is what I'm saying, based on this season. And obviously the manager and the squad that we've got now, we have to be challenging. We have a great squad as well. And I think, we always talk about other teams and how well they've done. But if it clicks for Arsenal, there's a potential there, isn't there, that we could do something big. And the recruitment that we're making as well, we really could if we get it right, and we just have to get that right. And Jonas Eidevall talks about this. It's all about that connection between players and all working together in that way and those relationships. So I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think so is the Champions League, because women's football is on the rise and the competitiveness is on the rise. So like you say, it'll be great as a neutral, but as Arsenal fans, we are probably going to go through our nervous moments throughout the season. I can see it already.
Well, we're still expecting the fixtures to be released before the end of July, and obviously we'll be looking at those Chelsea and City and United games, of course, deciding which ones will be hosted at the Emirates. But you could imagine an early clash against Chelsea early on in the season, just how much that might, set the tone to go and win that. It is very exciting. You talked about if Arsenal get it right, just how good it will be, but I think we all know managerially what the consequences will be if they get it wrong.
Yeah, I think it's harsh, but it's true, isn't it? Especially with this season being labelled as a disappointment for Arsenal as a club and for Jonas Eidevall. There's a lot of mixed opinions within the fans and the club about what they sort of think of him. And I think the best thing that we can do is sort of go into this season just giving it giving it a chance, and seeing how it goes, not going into it like in a negative way, because I think there's so much potential here. And yes, if he does get it wrong, then there's obviously questions to be asked, but let's be optimistic about the players that we've got, and I think we could really push here for. And obviously we haven't even talked about the cups in there, have we? Obviously we talked a little bit about the FA Cup, how big that would be if we could go to Wembley, and we'll maybe save our little infamous Conti Cup as well, because we just can't give that up, can we? But there's so many games as well, and so many different sort of trophies that are up for grabs. But it would be difficult for an Arsenal fan to tell you which of those competitions they would rather win. Probably the Champions League, but let's just take it as it comes. And I just hope we, put up a fight in these games, and we don't just, bow out like against the lower teams like we did this previous season.
Yeah, I think the WSL title, Champions League title, Conti Cup, FA Cup, and all the best Champions League away days. And anything else is utter
Yeah, we're
failure.
not asking for much, are we?
Yeah,
We'll just
no,
take all four, please.
absolutely. Daisy, season still feels like a long way away, doesn't it? But we're inching close. So we've got the Olympics up next. We've then got this tour of the USA. Obviously, the under-19 Euros still going on to keep an eye on, and sooner rather than later, we'll be back at Meadow Park.
Yeah, I can't wait to get started. I think the season, like you say, the season still feels a little bit, in the distant future. But with the international football coming up, and then obviously pre-season, I'm just super excited to get back into it.